I want you to picture a Sunday morning church service. You know, you've got the pews, the
There's
hymns,
a weird lighting.
right, the whole deal.
Yeah.
But when it comes time for communion, instead of those little trays filled with the individual plastic cups,
Oh, you mean the ones with the tiny foil peel-off tops?
yeah, the ones that are literally impossible to open quietly,
They're so loud.
so loud. But instead of those, there's just one single cup, a common vessel, and every single person in the room drinks from it.
Which, in a post-COVID world, that lands a little differently for most people. That is a very distinct image.
It really is. But for the man we're talking about today, Brent McCay, that single cup wasn't just, a hygiene choice or some quirky tradition. It was a law.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the dividing line between being saved and being lost.
Yeah.
If you used individual cups, you were essentially punching a ticket to hell.
That is an incredibly high-stakes cup of juice.
It is, and that's exactly where we are starting today. We're doing a deep dive into the life of Brent McCay. And this is all based on a really candid interview he did with Steve Reed. It's titled Discovering God Together.
And honestly, looking at the source material, calling this a spiritual journey feels like a massive understatement.
It's more like spiritual whiplash.
Whiplash is probably the perfect word, because his life story reads like a pendulum swinging between just extreme poles. He starts in what he calls an anti-church, this extremely rigid fundamentalism. Then the pendulum swings all the way to the other side.
Right. 14 years as a self-identified atheist.
Exactly. And finally, it swings back, but it doesn't land in the middle. It lands somewhere totally different, somewhere much more mystical.
So today, our mission is to unpack how a guy goes from believing God cares about the exact number of cups you use, to quitting God entirely in a hospital room, and finally ending up seeing this cosmic blue light connecting the universe.
And I think the real value here isn't just recounting a biography, as wild as it is. We want to extract the core insight McCay offers about the difference between religion, the systems we build, and relationship.
Because he argues they aren't just different things. He thinks they might actually be opposed to one another.
Yeah, that they get in each other's way.
So let's go back to that one-cup environment. This is where McCay grows up. It's a very specific branch of the Church of Christ. He actually calls them anti-churches.
And that terminology, the word anti, is really crucial here. It defines the group not by what they are for, but almost entirely by what they are against.
Exactly. The logic was basically, if the New Testament doesn't explicitly describe it, you can't do it.
Right.
So Sunday school, not in the Bible, so we're against it. Musical instruments, not in the Bible, against it.
Which is a very specific type of hermeneutic. And hermeneutic is just a fancy theological word for how you interpret a text. They were using a silence as prohibition hermeneutic.
Meaning if the text is silent, the answer is a hard no.
Right. If it's not mentioned, it's forbidden. Which, if you really think about it, sounds exhausting.
You'd have to constantly check if you're accidentally innovating something.
Exactly. And it creates this massive psychological burden, especially for a child. McCay describes this super vividly. If God cares that much about the administrative details of a Sunday service, down to the architecture of a classroom, what does that say about his character?
It paints God as a cosmic micromanager.
A taskmaster.
Yeah, a manager with a clipboard just following you around waiting for you to slip up. And for McCay, this wasn't just a Sunday thing. It mixed with a really painful home life.
His parents divorced when he was quite young, right?
Yeah, he was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
Which was already a massive scandal in that strict environment. But there's this one detail that just breaks my heart. He was the third of 3 boys.
And his mother had been very vocal about wanting a girl.
She wanted a girl to basically fix the broken family dynamic. So when Brent comes out, and he's a boy, he felt like he was a disappointment from the very moment he took his first breath.
That is a fundamental wound right there. You combine that feeling of being an inherent error with a theology that says God is constantly looking for errors.
It's a recipe for deep, internalized shame.
Absolutely. He also mentions suffering sexual assault as a child. He does clarify it wasn't a family member, but still, you stack trauma on top of abandonment, on top of a highly legalistic religion.
He said he was just a confused little dude who figured God hated him. He internalized all that judgment. He basically assumed, I'm bad, and God is the guy who punishes bad people.
Which is why what happens next is so classic in these types of religious stories. When you feel fundamentally bad inside, you often try to perform to become good on the outside.
You try to earn your way out of the deficit.
Right, you become a rule keeper.
So enter the teenage years. His older brother actually breaks away from the One Cup group and goes to a Baptist church.
Which probably felt like Las Vegas compared to where they came from.
Totally. So McCay follows him. And there, a youth minister actually treats him with kindness.
And this is his first real encounter with the concept of grace, the idea that you don't actually have to earn your seat at the table.
But it's messy, because he's still carrying that taskmaster God baggage in his head. And this leads to one of my favorite anecdotes from the source material. He calls it the Saturday read.
I love this concept. It's such a simple thing, but nobody actually does it.
He sits down one Saturday and just binges the Gospels.
Yeah.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Reads them all in one single sitting.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't. I mean, I've read them all, obviously, but never back-to-back like a Netflix series.
It completely changes the texture of the story. When you read it continuously like that, you get a composite picture of Jesus's actual personality. You see the whole arc.
And for McCay, this was the first crack in the dam.
Yeah.
Because he realized he actually liked Jesus.
Yeah, he saw this guy who was kind to outsiders, who yelled at the religious rule keepers, the exact type of people McCay was raised by, and he thought, okay, I can follow this guy.
But he still had what we could call the two gods problem.
Right. And let's break that down, because I think a lot of people might feel this without having a name for it. It's a form of cognitive dissonance that is incredibly common, but rarely admitted out loud in religious circles.
How does it work?
You have Jesus, who is safe, loving, sacrificial, and then you have God the Father, who is often viewed entirely through the lens of the Old Testament. Wrathful, ordering wars, demanding blood.
So McCay literally split them in his head.
Exactly. Jesus is the good cop, the Father is the bad cop.
He admits he thought the Father was scary and weird.
Hmm.
But here's the crazy part. He goes into ministry anyway. He goes to Bible college, gets the degree, becomes a pastor.
Because he's trying to save kids from the bad cop by introducing them to the good cop.
Wow. That's a fascinating way to look at it.
He's building a whole career on a fractured foundation. And for a while, it actually works. He starts this incredible soup kitchen ministry.
Yeah, it grows from just him and a buddy to like 70 or 80 people.
Hmm.
Eventually, a dying church actually donates their entire building to his group.
And he runs this for 11 years. He's living out the Jesus side of his faith, feeding the hungry, loving the outcast, taking a really meager salary.
But you can only ignore the bad cop for so long.
Right. The foundation eventually starts to crack.
While he's preaching every Sunday, the questions start bubbling up. He starts questioning major doctrines, things like hell, the role of women in the church. And he starts reading authors that were probably totally forbidden in his previous circles. Guys like Brian McLaren, or he reads that novel, The Shack.
He's broadening his inputs.
Yeah. And he starts bumping up against the theological concept that is a bit of a mouthful, penal substitutionary atonement.
Let's unwrap that because it sounds like a legal term, and it basically is. Penal means punishment. Substitutionary means someone takes your place. Atonement is fixing the broken relationship.
So the idea is God is angry at sin and must punish someone. We deserve the punishment, but Jesus steps in and takes the beating for us.
Correct. And for centuries, this has been the dominant way Western Christianity explains the cross. But for McCay, who is already terrified of God the Father, this doctrine just reinforced that God is violent.
It implies that God literally needs blood to be happy.
Yeah. McCay started asking, if God is love, why does he need to kill someone to forgive me? I don't need to kill someone to forgive my own kids.
And that is the thread that really unravels the sweater for him. He starts feeling like a liar. He's standing in the pulpit, preaching doctrines he doesn't even believe anymore, just to keep his paycheck and his status.
That is a soul-crushing place to be. The imposter syndrome must have been off the charts. You're supposedly guiding people spiritually, while internally you feel completely lost.
And then the actual crisis hits. And it isn't theological. It's intensely personal.
Yeah.
His middle son is diagnosed with lymphoma.
Real life crashes in. Because theories are one thing, but watching your own child suffer is something else entirely.
McCay becomes the full-time caretaker. He's literally living in the hospital. And there's this one night that he describes that gives me chills just thinking about it.
It's a heavy scene.
It's 2 a.m. His son has had a brutal day of chemo and is finally asleep. But down the hall, McCay can hear other children crying in pain.
He is surrounded by innocent suffering. This is the ancient problem of evil just staring him right in the face. If God is all-powerful and all-loving, why is there a child screaming in room 304?
And McCay just hits the wall. He gets down on his knees, being careful not to wake his son, and he whispers his resignation. He tells God, I'm done. I'm not chasing you anymore. Either you aren't there, you don't care, but I am out.
He quits. He doesn't just take a break. He completely unplugs the machine, stops praying, stops reading, stops trying to justify the bad cop.
And what happens next is the pivot point of his entire life. You would expect he would feel terrified, right? He's just told the creator of the universe to get lost. He probably expects lightning, or at least crushing guilt.
Or a deep existential void.
But instead, he sleeps. He says a peace that passes understanding washed over him, and he slept through the night for the first time in weeks.
This is so fascinating because at the time, McCay interpreted this piece as proof that God wasn't real.
Right. He thought, oh, the relief I'm feeling, that's the relief of dropping a delusion. I feel better because I stopped pretending there's a magic man in the sky.
And psychologically, that makes total sense in the moment. If you stop hitting yourself in the head with a hammer, you feel a lot better.
And he thought God was the hammer.
Exactly. So he walks away. For 14 years, he identifies as an atheist, or at least an agnostic.
And we should clarify here, his life didn't suddenly become a fairy tale. His marriage fell apart. Life got really messy and hard. He wasn't secretly praying on the side. He was spiritually off the grid.
Which I think adds a lot of credibility to what happens next. He wasn't looking for a spiritual experience. He wasn't at a meditation retreat trying to find himself.
No, he was just walking across a college campus, totally mundane Tuesday afternoon vibes. And suddenly, bam, a vision.
And we need to be careful with the word vision because it can sound like a hallucination. But McCay describes it more as a sudden shift in perception.
He sees a light, a bluish-white light, but it isn't up in the sky. It's in everything.
Right.
He sees tendrils of this light connecting the trees, the pavement, the students walking by, the actual cells in his own body.
He is describing a web of existence.
He says he realized that this light was sustaining everything. He saw some people who were full of it, just radiating it, and others who were empty, like emotional vampires, trying to suck light from other people because they were cut off from the source.
This is a radical shift from his old theology. In the one-cup church, God was out there, separate, judging you from a distance. In this vision, God is the ground of being. God is the electricity running through the wires of the universe.
It sounds almost scientific, like quantum entanglement or something.
It does, and it's very similar to what mystics have been saying for centuries, from Christian mystics like Julian of Norwich to various Eastern philosophies, the idea that separation is an illusion. We are all connected by the same source.
And then comes the kicker. He hears a voice. Not an audible voice in his ears, but an internal instruction. And it asks him, do you want to know what I'm really like?
And he says yes.
And the voice says, I'm like Jesus.
Talk about a full circle moment. It brings him right back to that Saturday read from his teenage years.
But the instruction this time was incredibly specific. The voice basically told him, forget Moses, forget Paul, forget the preachers and the religious leaders. Look only at Jesus. If you want to see the Father, look at the Son.
This becomes the key to his entire reconstruction. He had to finally fire the bad cop.
Right.
He came to believe that if he saw something in the Old Testament that looked like a genocidal warlord, that wasn't God. That was humanity's imperfect filter trying to understand God. But Jesus was the high-definition picture.
So let's fast forward to the new McCay, where he is today. He obviously isn't an atheist anymore, but he is definitely not a one-cup guy either. He's landed somewhere else entirely.
He calls himself a follower of the way, which is actually the original term for early Christians before it became a giant institution.
He attends a house church now with no official preacher. He's writing books with titles like Redeeming God and Redeeming Humanity. But his current theology would probably give his old Sunday school teachers a heart attack.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at his lens of Jesus idea. This is his new hermeneutic. He argues that the Bible isn't a flat surface where every single verse has equal weight. He actually treats the Old Testament as a cautionary tale.
A cautionary tale. That's a bold way to frame it.
Yes. He views it as the story of humanity trying to reach God through rules, laws, and temples, and failing. He says we shouldn't read the Old Testament as a perfect description of God's nature, but as a diary of our evolving understanding. Jesus is the correction to that diary.
That has to be a huge relief for anyone who has struggled with those violent passages. He's basically giving you permission to disagree with the text if it conflates with the character of Jesus.
Which is controversial, surely, but for McCay, it was the only way to save his faith.
He's also embraced universalism, which brings us all the way back to the one cup versus everyone dynamic.
Yeah, he mentions his wife always had this really simple faith that everyone ends up in heaven. He used to think she was just naive. Now he thinks she was right all along.
And he uses the story of the prodigal son to explain it.
This is a brilliant insight from the interview. Most people focus entirely on the younger son in that story. The party animal who runs away, wastes his inheritance, ends up in a pigsty. He's the classic sinner.
Mm.
But McCay points out there are actually two prodigals in that story.
The older brother.
Right. The older brother stays home. He follows all the rules. He works hard in the fields, but he is bitter, angry, and incredibly judgmental. He is just as lost as the brother in the pigsty.
And McCay realized he had been both brothers.
Exactly. He was the judgmental legalist in the One Cup Church, and later he was the guy who ran away into atheism.
But the father loved them both. He went out of the house to meet both of them.
The father doesn't care if you're in the pew or the pub. He's just trying to get you to come inside to the party.
This also leads to a really interesting redefinition of things like the second coming, because McCay doesn't think Jesus is coming back on a cloud to scorch the earth and judge everyone.
No, he takes a much more mystical view. It's often called preterism or realized eschatology. He believes the return of Christ is actually an awakening. It's the moment when the Christ consciousness, that blue light he saw connecting everything, wakes up inside of us.
So it isn't an invasion from the sky. It's an internal evolution.
Precisely. It shifts the entire focus from waiting for the end of the world to transforming the world right now.
It is a lot to take in. We have gone from a God who strictly counts plastic communion cups to a God who is the literal energy sustaining a rock.
It is a massive paradigm shift. But I want to circle back to that hospital room for a second, because there's a profound question there that I think every listener needs to sit with.
Which is what?
When McCay quit God in that hospital room and suddenly felt peace, what did he actually quit?
Well, he says now that he didn't quit God. He quit his idol of God.
Right. He quit the taskmaster. He quit the crushing stress of performance. He quit the fear. And he suggests that the peace he felt that night was actually God finally being able to get through to him because the deafening noise of religion had finally stopped.
That is a deeply provocative thought. The idea that our religion, our attempts to be good, our rigid theology, our rules might actually be the static blocking the signal.
McCay advises people to ask God directly. Bypass the pastors. Bypass the podcasts, even this one. He says, ask God to show you who he really is and be willing to let go of everything you think you know.
It reminds me of that line he has about the truth. He says, if you are scared to question your faith, you don't really trust that God is true.
Yes. He suggests that searching for the truth is always safer than searching for God, especially if your definition of God is messed up. Because if God is real, truth will inevitably lead you to him. You don't have to protect the truth. It can handle your questions.
That is a very liberating place to land. It takes the pressure off. You don't have to have the perfect hermeneutic or drink from the right communion cup. You just have to be willing to look for the light.
And maybe, just maybe, realize that the light has been connecting us all along.
Brent McCay's story is a heavy one, but it ends at a place of serious hope. From the anti-church to the cosmic Christ. It challenges us to check our own filters. Are we worshiping the rules or the reality?
A question well worth asking.
I want to leave you with one final thought based on McCay's journey. Is it possible that searching for the truth is more effective than searching for God? Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We will see you next time.